Hey, this is the Battle Proof podcast at the BlueWire Studios at Wynn Las Vegas. Hey, Matt, how's it going, man?
Awesome, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Just wanted to comment on your shirt, Dirt Co. What's all that about?
Well, yeah, we were talking earlier. I mean, this is our clothing brand that we started for off-roaders. We're just tired of seeing everybody dressed in surf stuff.
Oh yeah,
And they don't surf. We're like, hey, why aren't you wearing off-road stuff? And most of them were just doesn't exist. So, we started this brand particularly for us to wear, and then it kind of manifested from there. And now it's, significant. And, we do basically product releases pretty much monthly now.
Really? Oh, like drops. Do you do like drops?
Exactly.
That's the big thing now, right? You do a drop and you sell everything in one go.
Well, what we realize is because the changes in fashion, it's people aren't waiting to buy something. They're not like, oh, let's wait and see what comes out in spring. They wake up every day and they want to purchase something new, and so it's pretty much on 24/7 now, and it's fun because we're making products that we like, and in some cases they solve problems that we have. Like we have these amazing socks that are made from bamboo that are antimicrobial and
broken down bamboo, not like
yeah. So, but they're antimicrobial, so you can wear them pre-running for a week and they don't smell. And so I don't know if you've ever been in a tour van or a car with somebody with a bunch of dudes.
Just like a normal day, like taking your sneakers off is pretty bad. Like,
well, yeah.
So like if you're in a van and like touring or something,
and with 4 dudes over the period of a couple of days,
that wouldn't be good.
You're in Mexico, so you may or may not have showers, and it gets a little funky. So I'm a germaphobe, and I don't like to smell people. So I figured out these socks, and that's just like one of the things that we have.
That is cool. That is cool. Like all different size socks, like no show, and then like up to the ankles, or what's the vibe on that?
No, they're black socks. They're super simple, right? We have a couple other colors. Like we just launched some American flag socks and some Mexican flag socks because we can't not include Mexico because our culture started in Baja.
Yeah, let's talk about. So your name is Matt Martelli.
It is.
Your brother
Josh
is Josh. You own a media company called Mad Media.
Yes.
Right? And like is that kind of, and we're talking about off-roading in general.
Sure.
Hence dirt, being in the dirt. Like how did you and your brother like kind of roll, before we go back in the day, how did you and your brother kind of roll into the media side of things?
We grew up in action sports, and you start skateboarding, and it's pretty much people hand you a camera at some point. And, very early on skating, first it was a regular camera, and then it was, video or film back then. And
big chunky, heavy camera.
Yeah, crazy. Yeah. We're running around with like Bolexes and, 16 and 35 all these 8mm film. But that was the beginning of it, and I really love creativity. I really love. I'm a terrible illustrator, so I took to photography like right away.
Okay.
And I just fell in love with it, and the idea of communicating, through an image, to me is something that's very special, right?
Yeah.
And if you can make yourself good enough to do it with still photography, then doing it with video is actually easier.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, I love both mediums, and so starting out at a young age, shooting, my friends skateboarding and who ended up becoming pretty big professional skateboarders, it started with that. And then, it just went on from there. It's like a drug. You're like, oh man, if we get this camera, we can do this. And then, it's editing, when we started, it was analog and then it became digital. So that was a whole thing of like, wow, now one guy with one camera and one computer can make a movie, really, you have greater control. And that still goes on to this day. I mean, I was just with my guys earlier, and we're just going back and forth about some of our next camera purchases and why we want, this red camera versus, this Black Magic camera. So we started this company or I started this company after working at advertising agencies and working at skateboard brands, and both of them kind of drove me crazy because the skateboard brands were very like haphazard, like, hey, we have an ad due today. What are we going to do? Who's got a photo? Okay, that's what it is, right? They were very reactionary. But the upside of it was that they could pivot immediately as trends changed, right? So then I went to work for ad agencies, and they are very stoic and planned out years in advance. And even though a trend might have changed, they were like, nope, we're not.
Oh, really?
This was the plan.
No way.
And I'm like, well, that's stupid. Like everything's changed, right?
Right.
So
that type of stuff kind of frustrated you.
yeah, so I thought if I could combine the discipline of traditional advertising with the guerrilla marketing tactics of skate culture, then I have something different, right? And was the formation of Mad Media. And I also wanted to be able to control all the mediums, like, climbing up to an art director level at a very young age was great, but it was also super frustrating because you would hand somebody your idea to translate into web or into television or film, and they would not get it. And a lot of times they were older people who had their kind of preset ways of like, I can imagine like right now, if some 20-year-old kid handed me a concept, me being 50, I might go, oh, I'm going to tweak it a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what's going on. And it bothered me. They didn't see the vision that I had for the piece of creative that we were creating. And so I started, working in those other mediums because I wanted to see that messaging through. And I also didn't subscribe to the idea that, if you're creative, you're only creative in one area. I don't think that that's true. I think if you're creative, you don't really know how many different spaces you can be creative in,
right.
And you should explore that.
Yeah.
Because you don't know. You might be the best musician, and you're a graphic designer, or you might be, a photographer and, a really good painter, right? I don't think that you can box creativity in. In fact, I think the more you explore it, the better you get. The more expressive you get, the more ideas you get. So that's why I started Mad Media, and and it worked.
Is there a reason, like, using the word mad? Because, like, maybe other people think it's mad, but maybe you don't?
No, it actually, the idea comes from a book that later on became Blade Runner, and the book was called Do Androids Dream of Robot Sheep? And there's a passage in that book that talks about, advertising will become, completely overwhelming. And at some point, the only messaging that will cut through is the truly mad media. So that's where I got the concept from was, Philip K. Dick and his writings and just the idea of where we were going with content. And it's somewhat come true, right?
Right.
With social media, it's like, how do you create something that gets people's attention?
Yeah, and like social media now, like when you're talking about the ad agencies planning things out for like months or maybe even into the next year, that just doesn't. You can still have that mindset, but like now it's like instant.
Well,
like people creating content now, like I think the first thing, nothing to do with sports, was like when people saw tsunamis for the first time.
Sure.
Because people had phones and stuff. It's like, I've never even heard of tsunami until I saw it on the news.
Right.
And I think that's where it kind of started. So it's like now it is a tsunami of media. Like it's just like nonstop. Like you can't keep up with it.
Well, it also democratized it. I mean, you look at it, it's one of the things I laugh at now is like some of the best creators are coming out of these third worlds, like these African kids.
Oh yeah,
you know
like
what I mean?
Yeah,
you're like that. I mean, they're outperforming entire ad agencies, right?
Right, yeah.
And I love that.
Like
I love
impressions and views and stuff.
Yeah, I just love the punk rockness of it. Of like, what if you could go hand kids all over the world cameras and see what happens, see what they do with it, and that's really kind of what's happening.
That's what happened now with TikTok. Like the biggest stars are doing stuff out of their bedrooms.
Yeah. You don't need the studio or the gnarly cameras or all that stuff. It it distills back down to the idea. Although the contra part of it is that now we also see a lot of terrible content, right?
Right.
So in one sense, it's like it's taking the filter off, so everything is mixed together.
But you can choose what you want to watch. That's the good thing about the phones. I guess why everyone's head is just down because they're just looking at content they want to see. And it's like how rare, like when do you really watch TV? Like now you go on TV and like every TV station is like it's an app. So like YouTube is an app. And so you can just watch whenever whatever you want, whenever you want. But then it's just like maybe the hardest thing to do now is like who's gonna like your content? Like in fact, like even when you put content out, you don't know who's gonna like it. Like I'm from the record business before I went into like media myself, and I can remember like being in the studio, and it's getting to like do the final mix of that record. A lot of people I was working with going, "Oh, it's not right yet. Still needs this. Still needs that." And I was like the guy going, "It's ready. Let's put it out. Let's see if people are gonna like it." I think that's the hardest thing to do with content. So like when you were mentioning earlier at an ad agency, you're a young kid, you got these real cool ideas, but the older guy is like saying, maybe not. That frustration, you're forming a new company from that. Now, how long it took you to do everything might have been like 10 years, 20 years. Now you could probably do it in 1 year, 2 years with the speed.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think it's an interesting evolution because it's like one of these things where now the tools are more accessible.
Yeah.
So you're getting great content and you're getting terrible content. It's music
Right.
is an interesting one because and this would be a good conversation because you're from the music industry. Is that I don't think Napster killed the music industry. I think the music industry killed itself by putting out too much garbage. We did a lot of work for Virgin Records and they had some great artists, but the majority of their artists were terrible, right? And they were copies of somebody else who had a hit. And so they did this thing where, if you had a DMX who was successful, they would have 20 other
Really?
wacky DMX versions, and they would all like, yeah, cool. This is the
That's
market.
so distinctive, DMX, though. Like,
Right?
to do a copycat DMX, it's like, who's going to want that?
Well, that's to us, that's obvious. But like, I'm also a person who like, I'm opinionated. I go into a room and listen to an album, and I'm like, this is terrible. You know what I mean? But I don't. I also haven't spent $100,000 producing that album,
Yeah.
so I can be objective, right? I just think that content is content, and it's either good or bad. And for sure, there's content that appeals to different people. But I think when you produce good content, like
Right.
the best example I'll use is when we produced and directed the first Gymkhana. We didn't know what it was going to do. We knew that it was good, right? But it's kind of like I liken it to like Metallica putting out Ride the Lightning. There was no audience for that type of music.
Yeah.
There was no business plan for it. It was like, hey, we produced something that
You just
we
wanted
think,
to do it.
Yeah, they're like, look, we produced something we think is really badass, and we're going to share it with everybody. And if they like it, great. If not, and the purity of what they created, it created a market, it created a culture that then, X amount of bands then followed, right?
Yeah.
But like when you go back to that time period of like when they put that album out, it was like there's no market for it at all.
Right.
So that's an important idea of like just let creatives be creative. Not everything is going to be a giant hit record, but those ideas feed off of one another and will create great content.
Yeah. Well, I think like when you're talking about music or any form of creativity, it's analog to digital. That kind of transition and progression was kind of crazy.
Sure.
Like in the music business, when like you had like the MP3 and you bring up Napster,
Sure.
you could say, like with Napster, you had this like Metallica was really against Napster, right? Because everyone was like
Well,
downloading.
at least their drummer was.
Yeah. So it was like, I mean, yeah, that was crazy. And then, but really the downfall of the music business, kind of from my point of view, being in the record business at that time and selling a decent amount of records as an independent label, is, going to digital at the time when the agreements came up and the money came up, you would if you sign a recording agreement back in the day, it would be the agreement would say worldwide, it could be worldwide and the universe and any territories that may happen in the future.
Sure.
Right. So when the MP3 thing came along, it was such a new thing that the record companies, they were getting, we'll sign the digital rights. The digital rights was like Mars back then.
Right.
And everyone signed them. All the major record labels, all the big independent labels, everything. Like we were a very small label, and we were getting offered like $25,000 an album. And this is just instrumental jazz music from a company called eMusic.
Right.
And they were like doing these huge big deals and stuff. And all the record labels did it because it was free money.
Right.
But what they didn't realize is that was the future, and that was going to become like the record industry.
Yeah.
So I don't know, is there something like that now that people don't realize that they should realize now?
Yeah, I mean, I think digital, like video content in particular, is that right? So, like when you look at the tradition of television and movie studios and the archive of content that they built up that still plays on television to this day, it's valuable. It's funny because one of the guys through off-road racing that I became friends with was John Langley, who produced the television show Cops.
Okay.
And, it was the first reality,
big show then.
Yeah. And it just, it goes on in perpetuity because people are always going to get into trouble. Right. But that was his thing is he's like, man, like this back catalog that we own, just massive. Right. And so I can go to any country, any, television network, any digital network and go, hey, I've got, 8 million hours of content and, what do you give me for it? Right. So like, and even that's unscripted, reality show stuff. Like, when you produce good content, it's got value, and you need to understand that. And as you go forward, you need to understand you're building a back catalog, just like a recording artist. It's like, now you're starting to see these, purchases of legacy musicians like the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and what they're getting for their back catalog because, in 100 years, people are still going to listen to the Beatles.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they created something that's so good that it's going to stand the test of time. And it'll be sampled and referred to and copied and so on and so forth. So I think that's true of video content or cinematography as well, And whether you're producing like the doc series that you did or whether you're producing, major films or what have you, you need to go in kind of with that organizational mindset.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to but when you're doing an album or a film, obviously it takes a lot more time than doing like a quick TikTok dance in your bedroom, right?
Sure.
And it's also like on the documentary side of things, it's like, maybe that's becoming a bit of an old format, but everyone likes a good story. So I think that's how Netflix kind of really built their kind of brand, right? With all these kind of like documentaries on murderers and stuff like that. It's kind of like that's how they build it, right?
Sure.
And but yeah, so if we go back to the Dirt Company and Mad Media.
Back to the dirt.
Yeah, back to the dirt. Let's talk about dirt. So starting that media company, like since Mad Media is like two people, you and your brother, like although your brother's not here, like how is he as passionate about the dirt as you? Or is he like more kind of like on the business end of things and you just wanted to do things as brothers? Or were you like, how far apart are you in age? Like, were you always doing stuff together?
We grew up together. We're very close. We're 2 years apart.
Okay, yeah.
We moved from Michigan, from Kalamazoo here. I was 12, he was 10. So that, I think, made us even closer because, it's like we were pretty much landing on Mars when we got to Southern California.
Yeah.
I went to a school that there was,
Was it just like the desert back then or something? Like not a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
compared to now.
I mean, talk about culture shock. I mean, we lived on the west side of Kalamazoo, Michigan, which was predominantly a black neighborhood. And then we moved to El Cajon, which there are no black people there, right?
Okay.
And but we walked into, skateboarding, off-road culture, surfing. Like it was just magical. It was like literally a time in the 80s where people, like the neighbors, would give you, hey, here's a three-wheeler. Like now it's like you would never give your neighbor kid a three-wheeler, right?
And you could probably just like go in the back door, grab a can of Coke or something.
Yeah, we'd drive, three-wheelers around the streets of El Cajon, wave at the cops, go get a 12-pack for our dad at the liquor store. They wouldn't even ask us for money. They're like, oh, the Martelli kids, they're good for it. They put a little, a little notch down, so when your dad showed back up, he'd pay for the beer or whatever. So it was, a completely magical time. And we had, world champion off-roaders around us, motocross racers, some musicians and movie stars, right? So it was really like, it was just crazy. And then it was like, what are you doing this weekend? Oh, let's go to Glamis. What are you doing this weekend? Let's go skate Del Mar. What are you doing this weekend? Let's go to Baja. Like there was so much to do that was just spectacular.
You can country drop. There's not many places you can do that,
No.
right? So like, boom, boom.
Yeah.
Maybe Europe. But
Yeah, and even now, I mean, that's the magic of Southern California. That's why it's spawned so many trends, is that we don't have winter, right? And we have this crazy accessibility of, the mountains, the deserts, the beach, all within an hour drive, right? So it's got this energy about it that's pretty special. And then, through growing up in it and then also doing some of the research, I began to understand why we had so much technical innovation in off-road racing, which was born out of hot rod culture, but was also being generated by the aerospace industry here. So we have all these geniuses,
right.
From the aerospace industry who like look at, guys working on their cars and they're like, I know how to make that faster. Way faster.
That's cool.
We're designing rocket ships and planes and, weapons war and all this kind of stuff. So, building a fast off-road vehicle or a hot rod is pretty easy comparatively.
Yeah.
And it just, we were chatting a little bit earlier too, like you also had these people around you who were seemingly like magic and kind of unstoppable, like Mickey Thompson. Like when you distill it down, you realize like this guy ran a printing press and for some reason thought that he could build a vehicle to go set the land speed record and beat factories.
Why did he want to do that?
Because he's American. It sounds badass, right? If you could be the guy that did that, if you
So he must have seen something on TV or something.
yeah, if you had that idea,
Yeah.
right? If you literally are like, hey, if we take these two, and I'm probably going to screw it up. Danny Thompson, his son is a friend of mine, and also a off-road racer and land speed record holder. But I think they took two Cadillac engines and just put them in line. That was his idea. Is like, wow, the British are doing it their way with their British engines, but we have way more, horsepower because of the engines that we build in America. They just have more throughput, right?
Yeah.
They're bigger engines, they're heavier, but there's no replacement for displacement, right?
And going in a straight line as well.
Yeah, so he did that and he went out and set the land speed record. A car that he literally drew on the floor in his garage and then built it, with the help of a couple friends. And then I think, obviously I wasn't there for it, but I think once you do something like that, it's like this flame, this fire where you're like, huh.
Yeah, you've set everyone thinking around you.
Yeah.
Like then you maybe probably want to beat your own record.
So when you grow up and you're like, oh, Mickey wasn't my neighbor or anything like that. He was, in Southern California, but we were growing up and seeing all the things that he did and other people like him. It just manifests this idea of like, oh, like you could do seemingly anything. And then you'd run into like, we went to visit the Chennis shop and they're making, off-road race cars in this shop. And we're like, holy shit, You know what I mean? Like, this is incredible, right? Like,
How old are you when it's kind of going down?
early teens, right?
Okay.
So like
So everything's amazing, and then
everything's amazing,
seeing that is like, whoa.
right? But when you talk to the average person, and they're like, talking about something, and you're like, no, Bob down the street, he
Yeah,
makes cars
down in his garage.
in his garage, not like buys them and tweaks on them,
Yeah,
but fabricates the frame. Basically builds everything except for the engine and transmission. Later on, we're building those too because we want more capability. So it's off-roading is a pretty incredible culture to grow up in because you have all these people who are high-level problem solvers, very intelligent people, and most of them aren't schooled. They're not engineers. They didn't go get a master's degree. They're literally, high school graduates who are like, man, I'm tired of peeing blood. We should probably make better shocks.
right.
Right? That's where Fox Shocks came from.
Okay.
John Marking raced the Mint 400 and, won it, and it beat him up so bad. He went to his friend that made motorcycle shocks and was like, how do we make the car better? Because I'm watching what you guys are doing in motorcycles. And now Fox, that division of Fox, is a $2 billion company.
Yeah. The like shocks is obviously a big thing in
Massive.
off road. Like I can remember going ATVing, like kind of like north of Tennessee somewhere. Never been on ATV. Did BMX as a kid and stuff. Went on this ATV. It was amazing. Like as long as you just go like my way was just like full throttle, just go up the hills, down the hills, over rocks, everything. And this machine let me do whatever I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I kind of did see some people like maybe like not crash, but maybe topple over or something because I just think like they just weren't going fast enough. I think you got to keep the vehicle moving forward is like the key.
Sure.
But the suspension, it was. I mean, I was ATVing for like 5 hours or something was the whole course. Got back to camp and stuff. Never thought I was tired or anything. Don't even think I pulled over really to drink anything or anything. It was like the most amazing experience I've ever had. It was like way better than like going on a jet ski or something.
That's what makes us special is like when you look at the vehicles that we build and race,
Yeah.
they're not the fastest vehicles. Their 0 to 60 isn't the fastest. Like they can't corner as well as a rally car or a Formula One car. But really where they excel is the suspension. I mean, a trophy
Right.
truck has 36 inches of wheel travel. That means the wheel can travel up and down 36 inches. It can hit a 3-foot square edge bump at north of 100 miles an hour and the cab stays level. When you ride in these vehicles or drive these vehicles, your brain literally has to rewire itself to understand what's going on. Like I remember the first time I rode in a trophy truck, I had to get out and like look at it and think for a while, like what just happened? I had to process it.
Yeah.
Right? Because like you're in it and you're like, it's happening, and you're absorbing it, but you can't really process it until afterwards, right? And then you're like,
You kind of like floating a little bit,
100%.
but then you can still feel the bumps and everything though. But it's not like how you would feel in a normal vehicle.
It's a completely different feeling, and that's the thing is like we're so used to driving a street vehicle, and you're like, watch out for the curb,
Yeah.
watch out for this, and you're like with a trophy truck, you can slide sideways over that curb, and you're like, did you feel anything? And that's just because of the dynamics of the vehicle, and that's really what makes us special, right? There's no other vehicle on the planet that can do 160 miles an hour over the nastiest terrain in the world, which fortunately we have right outside of Las Vegas here on the Mint 400 course. It is I take you out there and you look at stuff and you're like, you can't. You could crawl over this, but you're
Yeah.
going to get flats everywhere. But it's like we call it cleach. It's like embedded sharp rock, and it generally when you get tire spin on it, it just is the roughest, nastiest stuff for tires. Right. So it's just incredible that we can do the speeds for 400 miles over that course.
Right.
I mean, you go out and look at it and you're like, why would you do this? Right.
Yeah.
And it's, obviously it's the challenge of it's man versus nature, man versus machine, man versus man. It's insane competition.
How did you guys get involved in like don't you guys actually own those series now? Like if
Yeah.
you better since you're here, like reel off the series that you own.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
or run.
we own Unlimited Off-Road Racing, which is now 3 races, the Parker 400, the Mint 400, and the California 300. Arizona, Nevada, and California. Um, and we got into the promoter side of it just mainly out of frustration, right? So we're the media guys, and
Right, yeah.
we're doing all this stuff for different companies. And, at the time we were doing television work for General Tire. And the Mint had been restarted. The race had started in 1968. One of the oldest races, started the same year as the Ball 1000. The American version of that here in Vegas. It was started to promote the Mint Hotel.
When those started, sorry for butting in, but when those started, like how many kind of people raced?
The first years it was handfuls of people, right?
It was like
But
10, 20 people or something.
yeah, but it captured America's attention. Like it was a different time, so it was like in that era, people would go race the Indy 500 and the Mint 400, right? People like Parnelli Jones would race both.
So I'd want to do both, like do asphalt
Yeah.
and go in the dirt.
Yeah, and it wasn't like it is now where they're so stuck in one style of racing that they can't go into multiple disciplines.
Right.
But no, it's just the Eakins brothers really kicked it off with the first Peninsula run. These two brothers, had come back from World War II.
It's always these brothers, man.
Yeah, well, it when you're and I think that's definitely a thing. Because,
Yeah, it is.
Like you're either gonna beat the shit out of each other, or you're gonna complete something, right?
Right.
And the competitiveness is part of the drive, but it's also like having somebody that absolutely has your back. That's empowering.
Yeah.
Like I know for me, like I can go out and basically say things that I'm really not sure we can do, and then I could turn around to my brother and go, "He's so smart, we can figure this out," right? So it's I think that's an important dynamic, but I also think war is an important dynamic. You go and have an experience like World War II, and that changes you. And you come back as a veteran, and you're like, this is pretty boring. Let's do something crazy. And so the Eakins brothers, did this Peninsula run where they.
So that's like outdoing the crazy, like keeping the adrenaline going that's in you.
Yeah, it's like when you think about what they did at the era that they did, it's like there's no roads, right? They had to stop at post offices to do timestamps so they could prove to people that they actually did the whole thing, right? So it was this whole effort, right?
Then no helicopters following.
There was no gas station. They weren't even sure, like, hey, can we get gas down there? So there was things that held them up where they're like, they had to go bum gas off of a farmer and, keep going. And they did it. But that captured the imagination of America. They were on Time Magazine and all these big media outlets of the time. And the guys here in Vegas saw that and they went, that's a pretty good idea to, as a PR stunt. So consequently, they sent 2 buggies from Las Vegas to Reno Tahoe. And similar thing that got a ton of attention. And the very next year, they're like, let's do a loop race, right? Okay. And it started growing. And then one of the original guys, guy who's still around now, Norm Johnson, he reached out to his buddy Mel Larson, who was a drag race and a pavement promoter, and said, hey, people, why don't you make some phone calls and see who we can get? And so they got, Parnelli and a handful of famous racers to come out and race it. And after that, it was on. Everybody in the world, wanted to race it. And again, you have to understand that like all the actors and athletes at the time, they'd all been to war as well. So it was a pretty reasonable thing for them to look at it and go, yeah, we're going to race a car. That sounds fun, crazy. Now, I was talking to Patrick Dempsey, who's raced with us before, on why I can't get more of the actors to buy into it. And he's just straight up, he's like, look, actors now are pussies, like they don't want to, do anything that might stub their toe. But I think there's a handful of them out there that definitely will come and race with us. But yeah, it manifested through those two races and grew into the culture that we have now, which is massive, global. We've got Dakar, in Saudi Arabia. We've got rally raids all over the world now. We've got racing all over the West Coast, and then short course racing in the Midwest and the South. And that all spawned from right here from Southern California.
Right. When you mentioned a loop earlier, like, is that so it's like more controllable? So if they did a loop, like say it's a 20-mile loop or a 50-mile loop, then they can like maybe have some gas at a place or something. Like, is that how loop? Like, when did this kind of loop thing kind of come involved? Do you think? Like,
Well, the Ball 1000 started as a point to point race, and
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like,
so
point
that's
to point.
difficult, right?
Yeah.
It's difficult to logistically to support. So I
Yeah.
think the guys up here were like, yeah, that's cool, but we
Want to finish the race, maybe?
yeah, well, they wanted to start and finish the race in Vegas. and their point was like they're trying to promote a hotel, so the start and finish was actually right here in Las Vegas down on Fremont Street.
Okay.
Literally on the street, start the race, finish the race, right? Guy pulls up in front of the hotel all covered in dirt, and they hand him a beer, So that's where off-road racing started. I mean, it literally started here and in Baja simultaneously.
How big is the Mint 400 now? Because I've been once before.
Yeah.
But I didn't actually go out to point. I was in town.
Yeah. I mean, we're the biggest race in North America. I mean,
Yeah.
over the 4 days, we have 65,000 spectators. We had 430 teams race with us last year, so 1,260 registered racers. It's a big event, We had about 20,000 people at the start finish last year. We had a really good year last year, or this year rather. People are done with the pandemic. They want to get out and they want to be human beings again. So we're definitely reaping the rewards of that right now.
So what's this? You mentioned this unlimited thing, like joining them all together. Like, whose idea was that, and what was the reason for doing that?
Well, initially we started out and we were just going to focus on the Mint 400, which is what we did.
Yeah, that's the big one, right?
Yeah.
That's your big show.
And so we did that and it went well. And we thought, this mindset of like, rising tides will lift all ships, right? Well, that didn't really happen. What happened was a lot of incompetence and failure with other organizations, and they couldn't do what we had done. Even though that the blueprint was visible, there was a lot of reasons for that. And so we looked at that, and we're getting, bigger non-endemic brands involved. And, a lot of them told me, look, we're in for the Mint, but, if the next race is Silver State, we can't justify that. Right. Or if the next race is whatever, it doesn't draw enough people, it doesn't have enough entries, it's not big enough. So last year we launched the California 300, and that went really well. And then earlier this year, we were gifted the Parker 400, which is another, historic legendary race. And it was really interesting because the other league had screwed up so bad it got taken away from them. And, the BLM actually called us and said, hey, we would like you guys to run this. And that's because of, my brother and our crew and the way that we operate. Like if we say we're going to do something, we do it. We follow through, and we run it like a business. We treat people well. We treat people like, hey, we're in business together. We're not always going to agree or see eye to eye, but let's work through it. And that's been very successful for us. So initially, I really wasn't looking to get Parker. We're working on some other races.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really, really glad that we got it because the history of that race is personally very important to me. That was one of the races that I went to as a kid, and it really blew me away. It's on the Colorado River right below Havasu, and I showed up at that race in the late 80s as a kid, and it was incredible. There were tens of thousands of people. I'd even venture to say there was around 100,000 people spectating it.
No way.
Yeah.
So why do you think, like, if that had 100,000 people there, and we kind of like roll into short course, like in the Midwest with Crandon, that would get maybe like 100,000 or something?
Sure.
Like, how has Crandon kept that kind of, and then what happened with Parker? Like, why would it go downhill?
Well, it's
Like
just
in terms of crowds.
it's pressure. It's pressure managing people. Like when you have that amount of people, that there's a cost to that. There's
Right.
security. There's bathrooms. There's
Yeah.
like a lot of things to manage that, and you have to be willing to take that on. And
You're in the middle of the desert. I mean, even though you got the river there.
Look, the last 20 years of Best in the Desert, Casey Folks is the guy's, amazing. He built something seemingly out of nothing with no budget, right? But he was building events for the racers, right? And we're building events. We're the evolution of that. We're looking at it as like we wanted to build X Games of off road. We did that with the Mint 400. Now we're going to build 3 more, right? And build out our series. So why do I think that happened? I think there's a lot of reasons, but as it relates to Crandon used to be, everything evolved and changed. Crandon used to be one of the races that all the racers here also raced,
Right.
with the same vehicles. So before there were short course vehicles, they would go race Class 8 here, and then they would all go back to Crandon, and race Flanagan. Flanagan would come out here and race. I have photos of him racing the Mint. So it was more connected back then. But Crandon's a very special place, and it's a group of special people. And it's one of those things where it's like one family with some support, made something that was very special and a pillar of our culture. I'll be back there this fall, at the fall Crandon race.
If someone doesn't know what Crandon is and what short course is,
it's the Super Bowl of short course.
right? And
Right.
short course, in case no one knows, like the way I would describe it, and you would probably describe it differently. Like, because I'm from BMX, so it's a big BMX track for trucks, jumps and berms, and you can almost, maybe not Crandon, but most short course tracks, you can see the whole race from the grandstand. So it's more of a contained area.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I
Cool.
I put it.
How would you say it?
I'll turn on my promoter hat. No,
Okay.
it would be like taking every weight class champion in the UFC and putting them in a cage and saying, all right, let's figure out who's the baddest dude here, right?
Right.
And that's what Crandon's like. It is absolutely, if not the most, Turn 1 at Crandon is probably the most spectacular motorsport spectacle in the world. Like,
So they call it like they call it a rush, right?
yeah, land rush.
Land rush. So all the trucks are all in a row. And this doesn't happen in short course because they kind of do a rolling start, like 2 by 2, side by side. With Crandon, say it's like 20 plus 30 trucks. Some of the
Sometimes
classes
40.
more like even behind.
Yeah.
And it's just like literally like go and they go and all rushed into one corner.
Off camber.
Yeah, and going like over 100 miles an hour into that corner.
So the camber's the camber. The corner is off camber, right? So you're sliding sideways at 100 miles an hour, and you hope the guy inside of you isn't going to screw up, because if he does, then you go like dominoes.
Yeah.
Like, so the level of like commitment like is unparalleled in any other mode. I would say like
Wonder what it would be like. Like
Isle
if you
of
didn't,
Man, maybe like Isle of Man if they were land rush starting, like that's what it would be like. But they have longer stretches in Isle of Man. This is a short, condensed area. It is like 100% go from the drop of the flag, and it is. I mean, I've been to every form of motorsport there is, and I'm telling you, like, if you're into motorsports, go to Crandon, right? Go watch.
I agree.
Go watch Turn 1. You will not be disappointed.
it is cool going to like see NASCAR and Formula One, and then if you go to like on the straight and see how actual quick they go past you is amazing.
Yeah.
But like after maybe I don't know like so many laps, you're kind of like you want free movement of going to other areas to see the race. But where I'm going with this is seeing short course and like Supercross and all these like it is so exciting. It is so amazing. Like
It's completely visceral.
it's very, very hard for the. Am I right in saying it's very hard to show how great it is live, like through film?
Yes and no. I think it's a two-part answer. Is I think yes in general, right? But also no in the fact that like you can't show that in film if you don't understand it. And most of the time, what you're seeing is coverage, right?
Yeah.
They're like, "Hey, we got 4 cameras. We're going to cover the whole track," and that's not going to get across the dynamics of what the vehicles are doing, right? And so that's the difference between shooting something cinematically and shooting it for coverage. So when trucks are jumping and you're in a tower, you can't tell how high they're jumping, right? You can't tell that they're 15 feet in the air and they're absolutely incredible, right? So just understanding the dynamics of the vehicle and the camera angles is a huge thing, and I see failure in that, not just in off-road, but in everything, right? Like why are you shooting football this way? You should be down on the field, right?
Right.
Where are the cameras on the guys, right? I want to see GoPro angles of those guys hitting each other. That would be exciting, right? Why aren't they doing that? Doesn't make any sense to me. There's small camera tech that they could be doing that in.
Yeah.
So that's the problem with being a cinematographer is everything you look at, you're dissecting it and going,
Right.
oh, I'd do this, or they should try this, right?
Do you think? So obviously, doing the Mod Kids films, that is short course. That's
Yeah.
kind of like how I kind of got into the whole dirt side of things and trucks and stuff. Since I've got you in the studio, it'd be really cool to talk about freestyle, whatever. It's like, how can short course grow? And we'll go like, when I spoke to you on the phone the other week, you were talking about how big it was.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
And
that's what...
So it's a bit like the Parker thing, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Like how big it was, and now it's not as big.
In the 80s, we walked into, Southern California and literally walked into Mickey Thompson events at our stadium. It was like 65,000 people just going completely ape. And the vehicles, the short course vehicles of that time were well over $1 million. The trucks were, they were spectacular.
Even in a stadium though, it's not big enough really to like. How did they make it work?
You have to remember those vehicles are different from what we have in outdoor. So like really what we have in short course is really like motocross to supercross. And what we had in that era were really, let's call them supercross trucks. They were smaller.
Oh, cool.
They had more immediate horsepower. They were lighter.
Were they like a UTV size or a bit bigger than that?
They're like a mid-sized truck.
Like a Ranger or something?
But when, after Mickey was killed and those vehicles started being raced on what we have now, which are really outdoor tracks, right? Which is more like motocross. The tracks were bigger. The vehicle designs changed, right? And now you have a much larger truck that's, running north of 100 miles an hour in these long stretches. So that's different from what short course started. Short course started simply as a marketing tool for desert racing. Because what Mickey realized is like, when he looked at all these other forms of racing that were bigger, it was because they were accessible, because you could walk up, to a drag strip, or you could walk up to a racetrack and you could see those vehicles race and they stayed within eyesight. So he created that for off-road, and that's what Mickey Thompson short course was. Which then after he died, that led to outdoor short course is what we have today. That first started with the Soda series and on, right?
Yeah. So after he died, like he was also the Vision.
Yeah.
And
Mickey Thompson,
maybe a bit of the Vision kind of lost its way as people came on board.
He was more than the Vision. He was, he was an engineer, vehicle constructor, racer, and a hell of a promoter. Like in terms of a sales guy, like I still ask a lot of the OG guys, like, hey, were you in the room when Mickey got, the Air Force to sponsor,
Getting sponsorship is really hard.
Back then, though, too, you're like, hey, we have this thing that is completely unknown, and we need $2 million from you, right? In the '80s, and he got it. And I would love to have been a fly on the wall in all those rooms, but I think when he died, his son tried to keep it going, and there was just too many things working against him. And then a lot of the racers at the time, and again, I'm still getting parts of the story, but they left and went to NASCAR with the idea of racing trucks, which is now what the Truck Series is.
Yeah.
And when they did that, I think they all thought that they were going to be partners in it. Like, hey, we're bringing you.
And everyone went to the asphalt side of things.
Yeah. And so a lot of them went over to asphalt because it seemed more stable, right?
Right.
And, you got to understand that, like, during that time, these guys were making good money, and they had spawned, like people like Walker Evans had been smart enough to spawn a shock company and a wheel company. So he was racing, it was the saying, race on Sunday, sell on Monday, right?
Yeah.
So he was racing and getting paid to race. And then he had his manufacturing business, manufacturing shocks and wheels. And like, they were making really good money. So when the party was over, a lot of them hadn't planned for what if this happens? Nobody thinks like, the guy running the whole show is going to end up getting murdered, right? That's not really something you write into a business plan. And I think of that era too, like money was coming so easy for them that they were on high, and they were like, this is great, everything's great. We have, all this cash flow, all this opportunity, and then boom, it's over. And it took a couple years, but that series went away. And ever since then, off-road's been lost. And we, fortunately we grew up in that era and we saw all those things and really what
It's lost, but not lost.
No,
but it hasn't been found by. If you look at like a big like golf, for instance, like Tiger Woods, he was like bigger than golf.
right.
Lance Armstrong, he was bigger than cycling.
Yeah.
If off road could get that, sometimes like it takes one person.
Yeah, that's part of it is the characters,
So it's like, how about bringing up like say the future? So because what I want to ask you, like, how can short course grow is one question.
Sure.
And two, how can, like, I guess it's like UFC is a media company,
Sure.
right? Amazing media company. It's a lot easier to promote two people fighting each other than 40 people in a class with helmets on racing.
It is and it isn't. I mean, when you look at the history of the UFC, when Dana and the Fertittas bought it, it was illegal.
Yeah.
They only got licensed in New York a few years ago. So like the amount of hurdles that they had to overcome was like, really, it was a bad investment.
Yeah, no, what I'm saying though is it's easier to market this person versus this person, right? Two people. Like if you look at it like a Netflix documentary, like it's about this guy that killed someone, and you can have 100 people just talking about that one person. So it's very focused.
Sure.
Right? So fighting, boxing, UFC, it's very focused on two people. When it comes to racing, even NASCAR, Formula One, not everyone knows who's in the car, what the team is, who's behind that helmet and stuff. That's a lot. It takes a lot more money to promote that as a whole. But with short course, like, it seems to be like when you say Mickey Thompson, boom, big name, is like, can you do that? Can you say that today?
Well, I don't. I think it's about character development. I think that the responsibility of the league is to do that.
How do you think that can happen?
It's storytelling. It's content.
Right. But who's going to be able to do that? You're going to have like 20 mad medias be really passionate to be able to do that, right?
Well, you need one mad media, but the like, I'll pick on Lucas, right? Like where Lucas' failure was, or one of their failures was like they didn't promote the racers, right? They promoted Lucas the series, right? And that's just a shell. And if they would have gone out and put dollars and effort behind promoting each one of these athletes, through different mediums, they had them. At one point they had McGrath, they had Deegan, they had Pastrana. They had everybody. They just didn't do anything with
They
it.
filled the grandstands though at what they had.
They did, but again, like let's compare it to like that's cool to say that you filled some grandstands in Lake Elsinore. So what? How many people?
I don't know, 5,000-6,000 probably.
Let's say 20, right? That's still not 65,000.
Yeah.
Right. So you still haven't achieved what Mickey did. So I think the other thing is that era of racers, you had stars.
You had stars coming out.
You had Walker Evans. You had Ivan Stewart. You had people that like, and Ivan Stewart's a really good example because Toyota put money behind him and made him a household name, right? So
you need something like that.
Yeah, but but again, it's the support of the manufacturers, all the aftermarket manufacturers. It's support of the league as well, and ultimately, that's the league's responsibility is to drive that, right? Like one of the things that the UFC has done very well is their character development.
Yeah,
and they're playing a really hard numbers game, right? Because I'll pick on one situation. So like they have this Irish kid who's they're hoping follows in the steps of.
Is that Ian Gary?
No, well, yeah, him too, but Paddy the Baddy.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and it's like it's cool, but like now that guy's gotten to a level where it's like his next 2 fights.
It's critical. Like
that's not going to be easy.
No.
He's in the deep end in a division that's very got tough competition.
It's make or break. Like you just lose.
So you're the UFC and you've invested all this money into promoting this guy, and you're like, doesn't really look like he's going to pass the test. My opinion is he's not going to pass the test, right? So, how do you do that? The fortunate thing for me, in our former racing is I've got 1,260 characters, right? So that's a good thing, right? I just need to pluck the ones that I'm like, okay, cool. I can't support every single one of them currently, but I can help guide them, right?
Matt, give me $1 million.
Well, no,
1,200 people.
It's part of our responsibility is to help teach them and show them how to, promote themselves, thereby promoting the sport and the culture and the league, right?
Well, I think
But back to Mod Kids really quick.
Yeah, I was going to say that's what we started to do. Like we saw the future of off road,
and it was beautiful.
Spent a lot of money doing it.
Yeah, it was beautiful, and I got it right away because the gift that we were given when Razor launched the 170 and 570 was all of a sudden we had youth racing. We had it before with trophy carts, but what happened is that trophy carts quickly went from being $20,000 a vehicle to $100. So then you priced out all these people. So what we wanted was something that any family in America could look at and say, I can put that money together to put my kid.
And that's starting to happen now with the UTVs 100%. Because you can finance them. Like the elite vehicles, you can't really finance. It's normally like people with high disposable income that race.
When you look at it now, I'm totally excited about our future, right?
Yeah.
Because we've never had this. Like our culture has been around for a little bit over 50 years, and we've really never had youth racing. Teenagers, some kids get lucky. Their dad has money. They get in a 16 car or something when they're pretty young, but very, very little. Right now, we have this massive wave of kids that already have come up. Like we're getting the first, like I would call pro level wave right now, with Mitch Guthrie, RJ Anderson. I mean, those kids started in trophy carts.
They started in the cars, right?
And on and on, and there's so many kids that are so good. And I'll tell you, actually, I love telling this story. So a couple of years ago, I was in Dakar, and I went over to Saudi Arabia to see I was curious how this was going to work. And we're standing at the end of the stage, and Carlos Sainz and Cyril Dupre, like all the Dakar guys who've won it multiple times, like the heavies, right? and they're watching the finish of the UTVs, and Cyril Dupre's like, I do not understand how these boys are so fast, right? It's just incredible. They're just so fast. And I'm like, I looked at him and I'm like, I was polite about it. I said, yeah, I go, they're really fast because they all started when they were 6 years old.
Yeah, they're like born in the dirt.
Yeah. And so by the time they're in their late teens, early 20s, they've been driving for, a decade or more,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
If
And
you're 6 and a decade later, you're still only 16.
yeah. And we've never had that before.
Right.
So, I'm looking at Cyril and I'm like, hey, the days of the old guys club of like you being 60 years old and winning Dakar, I think those days are numbered because these kids are just so fast and so good at a young age, and they're just processing information quicker, right?
Right.
They're able to recover quicker, all the attributes of being young without, the learning curve because they've already started the learning curve at 6, right? And there's something about racing where, learning, you can tell everybody everything about it, but learning the feel of it, the ass computer, whatever anybody wants to call it, the ass dyno.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like you get into a car and you feel it and you become one with it. And you're
Right.
just like, you go. Right. And that's what those kids are capable of doing, because of how much time they put in off road. So I'm really excited about, the future of off road. And it was really cool when I saw you guys do Mod Kids. I was like, all right, that was like something in my head. I'm like, we need to do something to prop the kids out, to get them pumped up, to make them understand that we appreciate them, we want them here, and we want to grow them into future, off-road stars. Because you asked earlier, like, where's my Conor McGregor? One of those Mod Kids is definitely going to be one, right?
Right. Yeah.
And there's going to be.
so, yeah.
I don't think there's going to be one. I think there's going to be a lot of them.
There's quite a few now, like, because we filmed like I think like 20 families.
Yeah.
20 plus kids, and like I don't want to reel them off because I'll forget one or whatever, but they're all pro now.
Yeah, and a lot of them are racing with us now in the desert. Like we started youth racing with UTV World Championships 7 years ago.
Okay.
And that was like really like kind of we weren't sure what was going to happen, and it just exploded. And
I'm sure in the youth side, you probably saw it in the youth side as well, right?
Yes.
But when you did it and went, whoa, I didn't know this was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, when you extrapolate America out, America's an interesting place because we're very, vehicle centric. So, even though motorcycle racing off road has become very successful here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we were talking a couple days ago, and like you go to Loretta Lynn's and you see that, and you're like, holy cow! Like motocross and supercross. Like that'll never die.
Right.
One, because the culture that's already built. The other thing is it's not that expensive.
When you go into a store or something and you see like even like a MotoGP bike, you go, whoa, that's quite cheap.
Yeah.
Compared to like trucks and things like that.
You too, you like update it to now. Like, okay, now we have all these kids who start on electric scooters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They get the vibe, right? They're like, right, oh, this is cool. Like they understand balance and they start understanding all these things. And then, it's like, I feel like a little bit of like, there should be like a intermediary drug dealer that's like, all right, kid, you like the electric scooter? Here's a 2-banger, right? And now you can go a lot faster, right? So I think that, the electric bikes offer a new opportunity for bikes and really for us as well.
Everyone's jumping on scooters and bikes. Like I was like just going down the road the other day, and this kid was on a I think it was a bike, like electric bike.
Yeah.
And we weren't going that fast, but we were going like 40 or 35 or something. And I was very wary of like, does this kid know that I'm like literally right by him? So like, do I go like 60 to get by him? Do I slow down? Then he's looking behind. So, there's these kids on bikes going the same speed as cars and trucks now, which is kind of weird.
I dig it. It's funny.
I'm not saying I don't dig it. I'm just saying like in that experience, it was weird. Because I didn't want to run the kid over. Normally you just fly by a bicyclist,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's definitely there's some etiquette there for sure that I don't think has been necessarily defined.
That's what I'm saying. That they're like flying. Like back in the day, like flying cars was the future. Like, but the reality of that, everyone's just gonna be crashing and like go
But I
all
mean,
over the
remember
place.
the stuff we did on our BMX bikes? I mean,
Yeah.
I terrorized our neighborhood, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
I built jumps over streets
Yeah.
and, you know, like we would literally roll up to cars and lean,
Well,
you know, lean wood on the car and use it as a launch ramp, right?
that was a great thing back then. Like I can remember, like as a kid playing war all day in the woods.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna let your kid go in the woods all day now knowing what is out there.
Right.
Like I think like it's just different times.
Sure.
It's just different times. Like the things that you could do back then, you can't do now because like
I mean,
people they pull their phone out, they're
yes
filming
and-
you're on
yes and
social
no.
media. Look at these Martelli brothers tearing up the neighborhood. Like it would just be like, hey, you hear about those Martelli brothers like jumping over our car? Like it's just like local news.
Right.
But like now it can become national news and it can become world news like very quickly.
Yeah, I would have been famous back then.
Yeah. You would have been.
For
You'd have been
sure.
in jail.
Yeah, well, that too, you know, the details, right? But no, I think that, you know, as far as the kids go, it's amazing. I love it. And it's honestly dealing with the parents is probably the hardest thing for us, right? Like out of all the racers and all the things that we deal with, the parents are just, they're like, you know, they're like baseball or soccer parents. They're you know,
And they're spending a lot more money as well.
yeah, and I get it that they care, but man, they're bonkers, man. It's like your kid is 6, chill out, you know, or your kid's 9, chill out.
Yeah.
But it's still I enjoy it because it's like putting money in the bank.
Have you got like a team that deals with that? Like so some kind of like you know that you have security on the back of like it should be something else.
No, it's
like,
me and my cousin Killian. And
oh really?
it's hilarious because again, he's another kid from Michigan who he showed up out here to go to, you know, Grateful Dead concert with my brother. And you know, I think that was 14 years ago now or something like that. I don't know how many years it's been, but like, you know, we had to go to a short course race to do some filming. And so I'm like, hey, you're coming with me. I'm going to teach you how to, you know, put GoPros on cars. And, you know,
That's actually quite hard. Like filming the mod kid stuff.
Yeah.
Like we didn't have that many crews, but we may have like 3 crews following 2 families at the same time.
Yeah.
And then part of it is like when we get the footage back, like get more GoPro footage. And like back then, like it's just the logistics of getting the camera, putting it on, having the kid turn it on.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time they would turn it
forget.
off. And they
adult
think,
racers are the same way.
Okay.
I've had adult racers look at it and get confused and shut it off.
right, yeah. That
So-
happens a lot as well.
So
then
like now, like with the Mint and our races, like we literally, excuse me, we literally have a GoPro tech stand there, look at them, turn them on, make sure that they're going, and then, you know, we've built these big signs, right, for the co-drivers as they come through the infield. It says "Wipe your GoPro" because they always get dirt on them, right?
Yeah.
And we get laps of people racing with dirt on them.
Right. Yeah. No, but so when I can remember going to the race and I was going to say, I'm going to be like a GoPro tech right there. But it was hard.
It's a lot.
It's like, I couldn't believe how hard work it was. It was like, I just wanted to almost like give up. I mean, I'm not like a tech person, but like how easy could it be to put in place? It is quite hard, but I mean, maybe it's easier now, maybe because there's more, you know, like the stickies and, you know, this technology is improved.
We ended up actually, it's funny side story.
Probably designed something, right?
Yeah, we designed a roll bar mount, you know, and it's totally over the top like we do everything, you know, and it's like billet aluminum but I mean, you're going to put a $400 camera and the expectation is you come back with this, you know, bitchin', you know, piece of content, you know, the mount can't be plastic.
Yeah, there was, oh man, my mind's going to go blank. There was a family in the Modcot class that they were filming a lot of their own media content themselves.
Yeah.
And the father had designed like a special mount, you know, made aluminum or whatever for the GoPro, and then he would sell them at the track.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's exactly what we did. And but then the other part of it is then you got to go through hours and hours of footage just for one team.
At least it's not analog though.
Yes.
We're going back to the analog days of going through stuff like digitals. Yeah. Trying to, you know, where did that crash happen? You know, like editors, they want the crashes, right?
Yeah.
So like,
well, they want the drama, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
yeah, it's still a challenge. Now we're using, Starlink to do some streaming in
Oh
car.
yeah, tell me about that. Was cool.
It's really cool. We helped, or we didn't help. We pioneered in car, and what we've been using for the last couple of years is a box that's basically got seven different cellular cards in it. It's called a cellular array,
Hmm.
and basically it's just hunting for cellular signal. And
Getting the best signal.
whichever network is you got that signal, then that's what it's pushing data through. And so, we got a hold of one of these boxes, which wasn't intended for cars. So we had to, make some modifications to it. The cooling fan had to be bigger and, all this kind of stuff. Well, the problem is like we're racing in areas that don't have cell towers, right?
Yeah.
So there's limited coverage. So as we would race our course, there's about 20 or 30% of it that was blacked out. So we knew that it was possible to do it with Starlink, and we had some people help us with it, and it worked pretty good. And now it's getting better, and we're getting to the point where the cost has come down significantly, and
Yeah.
we're probably only a year away from everybody being able to have these units in their car, and live stream on their social media, as well as give us those feeds with multiple cameras, as well as data from the cars. So it's really exciting. It's really cool tech to push forward, and I think it'll help grow our sport.
On the 3 series you own, like what is the kind of the end goal on terms of the media? Like, are you broadcasting the whole event live? Do you
Yeah.
then do like some kind of edit, like a shorter version of the race?
Yeah, I mean, we typically do a live stream of the entire event, right? And then we'll do post edits of like highlights and different things that we think deserve another look. And that's really how the world works now, is they want to
Yeah.
see it live. And then after the event, they want to see the highlights, and that's
Right.
it.
Yeah.
Like we stopped doing TV a year ago, just because we weren't getting the results we wanted.
Is that like in racing, like especially on the short course stuff, like the races would be broadcast like 2 months after the event?
Yeah.
And then that's probably why I wasn't quite. But that
Well,
worked. That worked because they got the sponsors to
yeah.
get it on TV, which
I
is
mean,
a key
look,
thing for the sport.
at
But
this point, any coverage, any eyeballs, that's good, because we're a fraction of motorsports, and motorsports is a fraction of traditional sports. So we're in the game of new eyeballs. We know the
yeah,
product that we have is, if not the best, one of the best products in motorsports. I mean, like, all respect to Formula One and rally and NASCAR and all that kind of stuff, but there's nothing, absolutely nothing like seeing a trophy truck run 160 miles an hour over 3 foot whoops. It is mind bending, and the sound and the visceralness of it. Like, you feel it in your chest. Like, people talk about drag racing, and drag racing is cool. For a split second, it's like Godzilla yelling at you, but it's very like, okay, that's it. Whereas what we have, it's like there's so many different inputs. Like, there's the sound of the vehicles, what the vehicle's doing, the spray of the dirt, the contact with the other vehicles, which we allow, and then like at the Mint, we've designed a start finish area that has this big jump. So you're from basically 50 feet away from a trophy truck jumping 15, 20 feet in the air, and it's you hear all this and feel it, and then you hear the thump of them land in the dirt, right? It's like a little mini earthquake. You're like, oh, okay. And so all those things, there's nothing like that in motorsports besides what we're doing. And it's just a matter of sharing that with people, right?
yeah,
Once we show it to you, like, again, it's like being a drug dealer. First hits on me, I got you. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And so for us, I don't care if it's TV or live stream or TikTok, whatever I can do to get new people to look at what we're doing, we're going to do it. So we're interested in still doing television. It just has to be, the right thing. We just diverted that money that we were spending on television into the live stream, and that's paid off significantly.
Yeah,
for us.
that makes good sense.
So, what the future holds, we don't know, but I can tell you we're going to exhaust every single opportunity that we have to expose the sport of off-road racing to more people.
What do you think when I was saying like our sponsorship is quite hard to get, especially like paid sponsorship? Do you see like even in the Lucas days and shooting the Mod Kid stuff, I was kind of thinking like we need to bring someone new to the game.
Sure.
You know, like are you always kind of like are you always like hunting for like a new company, a new startup?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's 24/7 for me. Like I'm here in Vegas during fight week,
yeah.
and I'm having meetings with potential sponsors,
Okay.
right?
So one thing that annoys me is like, okay, we're in Vegas and gambling is a big thing. So like all like the sport, like anything like so the big sponsors are like crypto
Sure.
or some kind of gambling site. They seem to be the main two sponsors that all other podcasts get, sporting events get and stuff. Is there anything where other than crypto and gambling
Yeah,
that could be really big sponsors?
yeah, look, there's everything. Excuse me. When you look at what we sell trucks, we sell tires, we sell oil, we sell gas.
Yeah.
Anything that you can put on a vehicle, we sell all that stuff. Half that stuff exists because it came from off-road racing. So the potential of sponsors is massive. We're already attracting some of the biggest blue chip companies in the world, right? And we're just scratching the surface. And again, they don't know us. It's like many of those brands have never even spent money in racing, let alone off-road racing. And so it's us putting that value proposition in front of them. And it's also us raising the value proposition, which we've done with the Mint, but now we've got to do it with Parker. We've got to do it with the California 300. But the good news is like, when you look at the math of the situation, we did it with the Mint, which is great because it has this tradition and all this stuff. But Vegas is only 2 million people, right? So, and 1.8 million of them are from out of town, right? So it's a hard market when you look at those numbers to get people to participate. We're competing with a lot here in this town. It's a great town. The people are great. Generationally, they've grown up going to this race, and it's an important part of the culture of the city. But F1's here now. They have the NBA team coming. They have an NFL team already. Yeah. They're going to get everything, right?
Right.
So we've got to fight for our portion of mind share, and it's not going to be easy. But when you look at the other places that we're going racing, like Parker, for example, is within a 2.5 hour drive of Phoenix, and that whole area, that's like 17 million people, right? Then you go over to California, and that's 29 million people in the 2.5 hour drive, which is, by the way, the mecca for off road, right?
Yeah, and it's only like 2 hours or so from here, from Vegas.
So you start looking at the upside of that. Our upside's huge, right? And so I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of work, but I'm really excited about the future of what we're doing. And with youth racing, with UTV racing, with short course. Because you were asking me one of the questions about short course, or like what can be done to grow it, and part of it is that it needs to be reattached to desert racing because they're the same culture, right? They're from the same culture. It'd be like if people didn't talk about motocross and supercross. Like supercross is the entertainment version of motocross.
Yeah.
Like anybody who's a purist is like, supercross is cool, but motocross is what it's about.
So this is good. Like we can end it on this. So comparing it to that, like I totally understand. So if we wrap it up, like how can short course and desert like kind of merge? I guess like you guys are going to be a big part of it.
Yeah.
Right. Like how many years do you think you need?
It depends on how much money we get. Money speeds everything up.
Yeah.
No, but I could tell you, like, short course is important to us, and we will be integrating it with our events.
Okay, I'm happy about that.
Yeah. I absolutely love short course. I was one of the first forms of off-roading that I was introduced to, and seeing it back in the day with Mickey, I know it's possible.
Yeah.
And I think that it's up to us to bring that or unlock that value again.
Okay, cool. I think we can wrap up there. I think that's cool. All
Nice.
the future of off-road, and definitely appreciate you coming down today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.